We've had transfers in our pocket for over a month now, so who are we going to spend those precious F1 fantasy transfers on? Let's find out. What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Wednesday, August 21st. My name is Ewan. On today's episode, we're going to go over some green flag, yellow flag, red flag for Zandvoort, which is my F1 fantasy version of buy, sell, and hold. So hopefully you are around for the rest of the episodes this week. This is the third episode this week after a summer recap on Monday, some early team selection yesterday on Tuesday. Today is kind of buy, sell, hold, and then tomorrow is the big race preview with some final team selection. And then also on Saturday, join me for a deadline live stream as we go over all of the FP1, FP2, FP3 data, all the simulations coming out of F1 Fantasy Tools, 11FI, FF Trout, all those good places. We will go over all the data, kind of talk about our lineup conundrums and questions, concerns heading into the Dutch Grand Prix. But yes, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast. That way you never miss an episode. Like I said, third episode this week, one more tomorrow, and then the live stream on Saturday. But let's get into it here. Wanted to switch things up a tiny bit for this kind of format here. Just wanted to go over my report card for green flag, yellow flag, red flag from Belgium. So here are the 5 drivers that I nominated for that episode almost a month ago. At this point, I had Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo, and Alexander Albon. Gave Verstappen the yellow flag, 35 points, went up 0.2. Gonna give myself an A for that because didn't really say gung-ho go buy him, didn't really say sell him. So there we go. Alonso, gave him a red flag, 9 points, went up 0.1. So going to give myself a D for that. Magnussen, 6 points, went up 0.5, gets a B. Ricciardo, yellow flag, 8 points, 0.5. I'll give myself a B for that as well because I was more basing that on the hope that he would get transferred up to Red Bull over the summer break, but it did not happen. And then Alexander Albon, I gave a green flag, 2 points, went down 0.1 million. So I get an F for that. So just want to, hold myself accountable, just see where my thoughts were, how it all panned out as well. But overall, not too bad. Maybe I'd give myself a passing grade for Belgium. But let's get on to the Dutch Grand Prix here. And let's start with the big man up top, Max Verstappen, 31.3 million. On the season, he's got 31.8 points, 1.0 points per million, and he's gone up 1.3. However, over the last 3 races, 27 points per race, only worth 0.83 points per million, and he's gone up 0.4. Over the last 3 races, he's been outscored by Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri. He's also the most expensive asset in the game, and he's only had 0.2 price rise since Canada. So I'm not feeling great about Max Verstappen. He is in my team right now. I'm highly likely to transfer him out. It just causes such a imbalance in our F1 fantasy teams that I don't think, unless you have a massive budget, which I don't really have in my T1 team, 119.5 million, as you can see right there. 2 transfers for me going into this week, but I'm highly likely to use my wild card coming out of the summer break, as I discussed yesterday in the early team selection video. So definitely go check that out if you want some early thoughts before tomorrow's race preview. Back to Verstappen here, 31.3 million. That is just so much of your budget. The Red Bull car is clearly not as dominant as it used to be, as we saw at Spa. A lot of us were hoping that the engine penalty would kind of signal Max's rise back to the front of the grid. It did not happen. He struggled to a 4th place thanks to a George Russell disqualification. Most expensive asset, hasn't been scoring that well. McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari are bringing a ton of upgrades to Zandvoort, apparently. We'll check that out a little bit more before the race preview tomorrow. So like I said, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you never miss an episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. But yeah, for Max Verstappen today and this week, I'm just not feeling it. So I'm going to give him a red flag. That is mostly because he is so expensive. He's not really worth the price. You can get a lot better value for money with like Lando, Lewis, Oscar, even going down to George. A little bit of a warning now that we're a few minutes into the podcast. Today's episode will be mostly about these premium assets. I've got one budget driver at the back, but I was kind of talking about it in the summer recap with the Killer Bees graphic. So we are going to be going over some B tier drivers today. But first off, leading off the show, Max Verstappen gets the red flag here. Next up is Lewis Hamilton, 24.1 million points per race over the last 3 races is 39.6, 1.7 points per million, and he's gone up 2.3 in the last 3 races. Considering he's only gone up 4.8 million over the season, and he's gone up 2.3 over the last 3. That is quite a climb for one of the greatest to ever do it. He is the highest scoring F1 fantasy driver since Monaco at 31.8 points per race. And he's the only driver on the podium in 4 of the previous 5 races. So pretty impressive. The Mercedes W15, I believe is what they're calling it, is clearly on the rise. They've found something in their wind tunnel and their data that is just making it click a lot better. Red Bull has come out and said they may have reached the top of their concept with this regulations, with this car. So while Red Bull shot up and kind of plateaued a little bit, it looks like Mercedes, McLaren, and even Ferrari eventually will all continue to rise. So it's considering that Mercedes is so close already to Red Bull, if they've got a little bit more to unlock, there could be a scenario where Mercedes are consistently winning races. They've won 2 of the last 3. George Russell has had a couple of poles over the last 7 races as well. So clearly the entire weekend is starting to click a little bit. It does look like we're going to get some rain on Saturday in Zandvoort, but as of right now, there's a 1% chance of precipitation during the race on Sunday. So I don't think we're going to have a crazy amount of overtakes like we did last year. Adam, F1 Fantasy HQ, mentioned this. I think there was 240 overtakes, the most in F1 history or something like that. So I don't think we're going to get that again in Zandvoort this year. But for Lewis Hamilton, 24.1 million. He's been a fantastic asset over the last few weeks if you have had him in F1 Fantasy. However, I'm going to give him the yellow flag. I don't think you can sell him if you have him. If you've been riding him for a few weeks now, he's been a fantastic asset. You're not really going to get rid of him there. However, if you do not have him, he is so close to that tier A threshold now at 24.1 million. He's got 0.9 left to go before he climbs up to that next gap. I just don't think the budget upside is there. He is scoring a lot of points, some wins there. The Spa race was a little fortunate, so that's obviously been boosted his last 3 race points per race average there. But I just think with 0.9 to go, the upside is a tiny bit limited for him to be a budget and a points driver kind of that we want to go to in F1 Fantasy as of right now. So if you have him, hold him. If you don't have him, I don't think he needs to be at the top of your shopping list ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend. One man who could be at the top of your list is Oscar Piastri, 23.6 million. So he is 0.5 cheaper than Hamilton. It's not likely that he's gonna go up. If he wins a race or finishes second, he'll go up 1 million, which is fantastic. But that means you're gonna at least get 2 races of Oscar Piastri as a tier 1 asset. Whereas Lewis Hamilton wins, he's gonna go up to a tier A asset immediately, and then you might have to transfer him out again to get more budget drivers. So Oscar Piastri, like a little bit of a better long-term asset, even if he goes up like 0.5 and then 0.5 and 0.5, you get at least 3 races of him still as a B tier asset. So, and I think that McLaren have a better car than Mercedes right now. They've been a little bit better for consistently longer in the season so far. So I feel a little bit better about going with a McLaren driver, but let's check out Oscar Piastri's stats here. 33 points per race over the last 3, 1.46 points per million, and he's gone up 1.6 million. So he doesn't trail Lewis Hamilton by that much. He's actually outscoring his teammate Lando Norris by 6 F1 fantasy points since Monaco, which is crazy impressive considering how much Lando hype there has been in the F1 world, the F1 fantasy world as well. So Oscar is still getting it done there. And he's one of 2 drivers with a 1 million price jump in a single race since Spain. He got that in Hungary. Hamilton has had 2 at the British Grand Prix and Spa. So Piastri has shown the upside. He has the potential to go up 1 million. And you can at least bank on him being a tier B asset for at least 2 races of the remaining 10 this season. So for me, Oscar Piastri gets the green flag. Moving over here to another B tier asset, George Russell, 20.7 million, 15.4 points per race on the season, negative 1 point per race over the last three. As you know, he has had a DNF and a disqualification in two of the last three races. So it's been really unlucky for George Russell. However, of the four top teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes, Georgia's price at 20.7 million. That's the biggest gap from a B tier asset in the top four teams to the tier A threshold. So he has the biggest budget gaining potential among all 12 of those assets, if you're including constructors. And I think that's a fantastic kind of positive to hold on to for George Russell. So if you have George Russell, you've had a tough time. I know there's some other F1 fantasy content creators that have him in their team, but they should be looking on the bright side at this point. My wife says I have radical optimism, so maybe that is coming into my thinking here. But I just think there's so much potential upside now. And if you don't have George Russell, if you have avoided maybe his tumultuous last three races here that's been very roller coaster-y, I think he is definitely at the top of your shopping list, along with Oscar Piastri. He's tied first for the most poles since Monaco with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen with two. So he has that potential to have a great Saturday. And I think he's just been kind of unraveled by a couple of unlucky Sundays. I think he had a water failure at Silverstone where he was going quite well. And then obviously the weight thing that we all heard about in Spa. So for George Russell, he definitely gets the green flag for me. And truth be told, when I activate my wild card this weekend, which I'm very likely to do unless there's something crazy that comes out in the Friday and Saturday data, it will be an Oscar Piastri and George Russell led squad for me with Mercedes and McLaren as my two constructors. Moving over to the final asset today for green flag, yellow flag, red flag for the Dutch Grand Prix, Alexander Albon, 8.8 million. Now, this is a little bit of a soft spot for me. I have a soft spot for Alexander Albon. He was in last week's or the last races episode. 5 consecutive finishes is his longest race streak of the season. He's had 3 DNFs this year, so he's finished 5 races in a row. So great job by Williams and Alexander Albon for crossing the line at every race. He's reached Q3 in 3 of the last 7 races, so that's been on the rise. He's actually reached Q2 in 12 of 14 races this season. Best asset of the back four, and that would be like the Logan Sargent, Valtteri Bottas, Joe Guan Yu kind of pack of riders there. 8.8 million. He's gone up in his points per race, his points per million over the last 3 races as well. So trending upward. Price change still not there. He has been kind of affected by the fact that there's not as many DNFs this season in F1 Fantasy for us to kind of shoot up. So if there's more of a DNF race coming along, that would be better for his budget gain. But it sounds like Williams are going to attack the second half of the season quite strongly for F1 as they look to improve. They've got Carlos Sainz coming in 2025. So I think they're going to want to have an upward trajectory in the second half of the season, kind of build that momentum toward 2025 and the 2026 car, obviously. And I think Alexander Albon is going to be at the leading the pack there. He's a great driver. I really like him. And I just have a gut feeling that he is going to be one of the better C tier drivers in the second half of the season. Williams are going to add some much needed oomph to that car. They've got a couple of tracks that may traditionally suit Williams as well coming along. Alexander Albon is qualifying quite well also. So if there are hard to overtake tracks and we can get Alex a little bit further up the grid on a Saturday, I think he is a great asset as well. So I'm giving him the green flag, especially if you're stuck in that kind of back of the pack budget purgatory that a lot of us are in with like the Logan Sargent, Joe Guan Yu, Valtteri Bottas range. He is a little bit more expensive there. So this is more a green flag tinted with yellow. Like he's not a priority transfer, but if you are maybe like in like the Pierre Gasly kind of realm, even like a Daniel Ricciardo kind of area, I don't mind going down to Alexander Albon. You get some savings. I think you get 0.6 on Piastri, 1.6 on Ricciardo, and that gives yourself a little bit of a budget boost in your F1 fantasy team. Once again, the deadline live stream reminder for this Saturday. Join me Saturday afternoon at like 2 p.m. Germany time, 1 p.m. UK time. That will be 8 a.m. Eastern for the stateside viewers. And I will be here answering all of your F1 fantasy questions before the deadline for the Dutch Grand Prix. But like I said, this was the third of 4 episodes on the YouTube channel, F1 Fantasy Pole Position, for this week ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix. Go check out the last 2 episodes with the summer recap and the early team selection from yesterday. And tomorrow will be the big race preview and some final thoughts on team selection before that Saturday deadline live stream. Hopefully it is all going well with your tinkering. We'll have some more news coming out as drivers hit the track on Wednesday and Thursday ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix. But once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.